Hello everyone, I hope you are doing well. Well, I am going to present this small presentation on photography, basically creative photography, which I initially made for a university called Bath Spa University, which has its center in Ras Al Khaimah. But now I decided that I'll go home and record this whole presentation so that my students in Delhi University and elsewhere, and maybe sometimes I can apply abroad. So this presentation might come handy in sending the kind of demo that they require as to what are my teaching skills and how do I employ teaching strategies in my class. Well, before introducing myself, I just want to give you a little bit of a leader kind of a thing, like what I'm going to do in this presentation. Well, this presentation is basically divided into three parts. And for that, so that you can have a clearer view of the whole presentation, I'll have to switch off the lights. So if you can kindly switch off the lights, thank you, so that now you can focus on the presentation itself. So this presentation is basically divided into three parts. If we go to the next slide, we can see those three parts. The structure of the presentation is like on part one, what we are going to look at is basically we dissected this term called creative photography, and we go to the creative aspect of it. And the first part, we'll be discussing what is creativity and how do we start appreciating arts and aesthetics. And we also see what are the elements that make arts so appealing to not only professionals and connoisseurs of arts, but also to general public. So basically we'll be discussing some elements of visual design. Then we'll go to the second part, which has to do with photography and technology. How do you effectively engage machines in order to create arts? What are the rules of photography? Only I'll just be discussing a few majorly famous rules. Then how do we enhance our photography and arts through the elements of visual design, which we have discussed, which we will be discussing in part one. And the part three will basically talk about creative photography. So basically they will be joining part one with part two and coming to part three, which is the most important part of all the 3 points in structure. So let's start the presentation with my introduction. My name is Aqib Shehbaz. I've done my senior secondary, that is my schooling, from St. Xavier's High School in New Delhi. I did my first post-graduation PG in English literature in 2004. And my second master's was in mass communication from MCRC, which is Asia's premier institute in mass communication studies. I also have a CELTA degree from Cambridge, which I completed in Delhi. It's a certificate course that actually certifies you to teach English anywhere, any part of the world, basically. So the final thing which I'm doing right now is a PhD. It's almost about to complete within a few months. It's also in mass communication, which is my prime subject, but I am also equally interested, and I have 7 years of teaching experience when it comes to English communication skills and teaching English. So when you go to my experience, we see that I was for 7 years teaching English and media studies in the Department of English in Jazan University in Saudi Arabia. I had a brilliant time over there. People were really nice, but unfortunately I had to come back because my father had fallen ill and he needed me to be here. Once I came back, I joined Delhi University as an assistant professor, media studies. Before that, I was also working as a cinematographer for Magic Lantern Foundation production house, which was also in New Delhi. I enjoy writing poetry, analyzing movies and books in a very deeper way, and I love playing lawn tennis. So let's begin with this presentation. Well, what is creativity? You know, there's something which innately we all humans possess, that we have an eye for appreciating beauty in nature. So whether it's a photograph or a painting or a just piece of a good handwriting, there's something which is produced in such a way, the placement of the elements in such a way that it gives pleasure to the senses. And this appreciation of beauty is sometimes inborn, innately present in humans, and sometimes it can be learned, and it can be uh, taught and inculcated in people. How do we appreciate beauty, and how do we learn to behold the beauty of the frames that are available in front of our eyes. But before that, we should start engaging ourselves in the appreciation of beauty outside the camera or the frame. Once we start appreciating beauty outside in the real world, only then we can replicate, or at least start appreciating the replicas of those expressions of beauty on the canvas, or maybe on a frame, or like stuff like that. Like what I'm going to talk about, if you go to the next slide, you see that this is just a photograph, I mean just a painting. When everyone, whether it's a layman or a connoisseur of art, or an expert in photography, or a very nice painter, they are going to like this photograph for a specific reason. Everyone might have different reasons to appreciate this painting. And when we see, we can come out with a few decipherable rules that can be taught to people who do not appreciate arts on a deeper level. Like if you look at this photograph, and normally when we are looking at a frame or a painting or a photograph, our eye travels from the right towards the left. And you can see in this photograph, the interesting thing in this painting is that there is a curve over there. So there is a turn over there. Now this turn makes it very interesting because it gives a three-dimensional uh, view of the whole painting. It also creates a kind of depth in the painting. And you can ask questions like when I'm teaching in my classes are not like these, because in my class I want more of the student talking time and lesser of the teacher talking time. So what do? I do not start like this is just a presentation to impress the employers who are my prospective employers in the future. But when I'm teaching to my students, my style is more of like, I want to elicit more from them. I want them to speak. I want them to engage and interact. So I divide them into groups, and I give them several different activities where they come out and they tell me what I am going to look at it. Like a question which you can ask students with this painting is that, do you think it's a morning light or an evening light? Do you think the sun is setting, or maybe it's a morning or an evening time? Now they might come up with good answers, like correct answer, like it's a morning light. It's like more expanding. The sun is expanding. The light is kind of, and then you ask them like, is there something creepy? Is there something different in this painting? Which you then they will say yes. There is this texture of the road towards the bottom of the frame. You can see that there is something amiss. There's some kind of a blocks, or breaking blocks, and then your eye finds more relativity. You find more of those things across the right side of the painting also. Very well known sentence spoken by Albert Einstein once, that creativity is basically intelligence having fun. So, what does creativity actually do is that it prepares you to understand arts in a deeper way. Now, how do you create an interesting frame? You have several things, like the arrangement of lines in a specific way, and your technology will help you produce that art. Like technology enhances arts. How? Beauty can be created partly by innate talent, or partly by appreciating the rules to understand it. Like if you look at this photograph, this is a shot taken on a slow shutter by a camera, which is placed right in front on the first portion of a train, and this train is passing through uh, a subway station, or a subway rail track. And because of this slow shutter, you get a marvelous design where again you see that turn. And as I said, great photographs let your eyes travel from one point to the other, so you will basically find that curve or turn in good photographs. So like the painting we were talking about. Again, this is an interesting photograph. Now the play of lines is a very important thing. That's why when we look at visual design, now visual design has all those elements which are required to create a good photographs. Not necessarily all the photographers are looking at these things, that I have to include them in my frame in order to create good photograph, but they normally are found in great photography or great video or maybe great paintings and all the great things that our eyes appreciate. So these are the important things of visual design, whether it's line, form, shape, space, texture, and we are going to look at all of them one by one. So first of all, the most important thing is line. Okay, now line is very basic to human human, whether it's but and now line is a basic structure. It's a basic geometric figure, but it appears everywhere in our lives. Now if you look at these lines, they're like curved lines, and these are the straight lines, and then you again have a curve. Basically, metro or train photographs taken on a slow shutter speed, but sometimes line need not be very straight, like these lines. They are curved and they are nicely giving a very harmonious structure, not because of the lines alone, but there is also light which is kind of very angular, adding to the shine of the photographic structure that we have here, and the texture is also coming out very nicely. When we look at this photograph, now it's a plain arrangement of like this diagonal line and then this falling straight line, and you have a rectangular, upright rectangular structure, and this woman standing here. The photographer has deliberately chosen her to stand here. Now these kind of photographs, which play with contrast also, different shades of white, black and gray, they sometimes add to the mystery and the meaning of a photograph, which has to do with semantics of the photograph. How do you appreciate a photograph? There are some symbolic meanings of the photograph. You can read photographs on a very deep level. Like if you go back to the previous picture, you not only have a photograph, but there's a woman looking down in a very dejected mode, and then you interpret the photograph like this is a straight line depicting a fall, and she's at the last point of that fall. She is at the nadir of the point. And here, this part of the photograph, this shade, darker shade of the photograph, is basically showing an optimistic graph. It's an optimistic graph that the opportunities, even after a fall, still lie ahead of you. You can still go up the hill. You can still tread on a journey that will escalate and enhance your progress in life. So there's no need to look down upon, and there's still much more to do. So you can read these photographs. Now, sometimes the lines and lights play together. Like in this photograph, the lines, you see curved lines, they're almost like representing a calligraphic arrangement on a paper. So these lines and the falling of light, the photographer has deliberately chosen to leave this part as blank and black, and the rest part of it, the light is falling at the elements which the photographer wanted to illuminate and show. So they also kind of add beauty. Then we come to shape and form. Now shape is plainly a structure which is shown in a two-dimensional way, but when you add form to it, like you have these lines again, vertical lines and these horizontal lines. The wall has all those horizontal, and this part is the vertical one, and then you have this woman in the middle. Now adding form to it, that is the three-dimensional object or subject in the photograph, this gives you a more complete understanding of how you're almost there in the photograph. You can feel the roundness of her face and the body, and how she's clubbed between two structures, two concrete structures. So she's not like, she is in a very narrow space. So you can actually feel how she's on a very narrow plane, and she's sticking to this wall, and there's certain meaning of this photograph. So this shape and form complete the picture. You'll understand more of form when you go to the next picture, where a shallow depth of field, you do not see the things in the background, which is called shallow depth of field, is created with the more pronounced object, like the more fatter cactus in the foreground. This gives you a definitively more a definite more stronger form, because you can actually feel the spikes of the cactus, and you can also differentiate it from the things which are in the background. But this is also a classical example how color is going to add to your photographs. Yeah. Now, this is a perfect example of how space can create a beautiful contrast. Now, the photographer, and this is called fashion photography or portrait photography, it would fall in both the categories. Now, this one is a perfect example how the photographer chose the muse or the model to be dressed in a fashionable way, but yet he or she chose the background, a dilapidated structure, a building which is falling out, a very rogue kind of a background setting where the bed is also not very clean. So this is adding a contrast. A contrast you would not normally assume a person like this would go and sit in a place like this. But this contrast is basically adding up more. It is making visually more appealing, and that is why the arrangement of the space and visual dynamics is making it louder to pronounce. Like you can see, there is this white fur is chosen against a skinny black model. So this color is also adding as a contrast, and also the kind of look that she is giving. So these contrasting elements also make a photograph really nice. If you go to the third photograph of this one, this is again a photograph of color. Now, this photograph adds up more mystery through color contrast. Now, this is a woman who is not looking very happy. The mood on the face is also one of a complaining one, of one of a woman who's like disturbed in her life, and the lot around her, the buildings around her, also synchronize with the feelings that she's fuming inside, and you see the fumes all around. And the color of the fume that is chosen is right in contrast with the color that is in background, a very cold temperature background and a very warm one of the fumes. And then interestingly, the dress that she has chosen to wear is again a crisscross of lines. So lines are also playing. So the mood of the subject of the object is also very important. Now you go to this space one, this deliberate leaving of a huge space as empty and void also intensify, basically puts the subject or the object in a spotlight. So what they wanted to say, there is a woman who's looking directly into the camera through the reflection of a mirror, is highly appreciative of its own beauty when it comes to the whiteness that is left across. Sometimes color may not always add beauty to the frame, like this photograph of a train passing through, or a subway metro passing through a tunnel, is better replicated when you are showing it in a black and white photograph. So the same thing is when shown in a black and white photograph. It's not always that the color photograph will stand out. Obviously, color is an important part of visual dynamics, but at the same time, sometimes black and white brings out more features and more meaning to a photograph, but not always. Like if you go to the next photograph, the slow shutter speed shot this photograph with the vibrant red and blue and yellow tones of different colors are adding to the alignment. Also, these pole lights diffused in a star-like figure is adding much greater beauty to the frame. Had this photograph been a black and white photo, the beauty would not have been enhanced to such a level. Now, this is also a brilliant piece of work where minimalistic use of shutter speed and lighting of the vehicles is depicted in a reverse S form of a figure, where the road is also shining with the limited, and it's also a very soft shine on the black bitumen road, and this light is obviously coming from the vehicle's lights. So this slow shutter speed also is a great photograph to take. But as I said, not always is color the predominant feature in a photograph, and like this photograph is best presented in a black and white tone. Then the next thing which is important is the texture. Now texture visually transports you to the frame where you can actually touch and feel the object and the surface of the object which is being shown. Now texture is very important to be taken into consideration before taking a good photograph, because this is something that will make it look more real life. Now tone is also again a very good important, because we're not talking about the color but the tone. There is a specific tone to this photograph that transports us and transcends from the real zone to a dreamy like, or like you go into the past or go into the future. So different tones like the sepia tone is also used to show different kind of a meaning to the photograph. Now then there's something called balance. Now balance is very difficult to explain, but in a nutshell, for a layman, what I can say is that balance is when you see a photograph and that gives a harmonious symmetry to your mind. When you look at the photograph and you feel not everything is like equal, but it is somewhat balanced, like more pronounced example of a balance, because this is just geometric shapes. But a better example will be the next photograph. Now here the photographer has deliberately chosen to keep this part as black, and there are two cycles, one lit more as compared to the other one. Then you have this frame within a frame, and then these two people sitting on a bench with their faces turned towards against the camera, sorry. So in this way it's a very happily balanced photograph. Two couples and they're the two cycles, not necessarily they add up the numbers. No, I'm not trying to say that since there are two people so there should be necessarily two cycles, but the arrangement of the objects is in such a harmony that everything looks balanced to the eye of the mind. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the part one. Now in part two we are going to see, until now we were talking about different elements that create aesthetic beauty, uh, creative beauty to the frame. But how do you achieve it while the use of these machines? So we'll see what is photography and what are the rules of photography that help us create these visually spectacular images. Now photography is best said that it is a study of light. Photography is the study of light, but I feel that it is the best use of light to show elements in a frame in a clear and appealing manner. So you have a subject or an object which is properly lighted up with specific, whether it's 3-point lighting or mono lighting source, which is used like this. The travel of light through different media is what creates patterns. See, these are two different photographs and they're creating patterns, and light is falling as if water is flowing through a river. So you have to arrange light in a specific way that the optimum use of light aligns the elements in such a way that it enhances the subject or the object. Now you have two different things that need to be shown. You have a model and you have these bubbles, these soap bubbles flowing through. Now deliberately a top light has been used, minimal lighting is being used, because we do not only, had we wanted to just show this model, we would have used 3-point lighting. But here we have just used a top lighting and a front light. Why? Because the object of interest is basically these bubbles. And model comes secondary to the whole alignment of, again, this is a very balanced photograph. And now the activity of the model is also very important. We are not concerned with the face of the model or the look of the model. We are basically focusing on the activities that is being shown in the photograph. So in this way, a proper use of lighting with a dark background. We do not light up anything in the background, because here there is something which we want to clearly stand out from the rest of the objects. So we are showing in a different kind of lighting. Okay, now this is a very beautiful picture where you're creating balance through light. and you're creating a kind of a very strong unity of the picture. You have this light which is coming as if like divine inspiration from the skies, and is passing through the trees and all the branches and all of those bushes. And because of those things, the light that is falling down on the floor is falling as if they are falling in rays. You can actually see lines of light here. The sunlight, you cannot see lines normally, but here you can see even sunlight through several different streaks of lines. And now these are two silhouettes who are dancing 2 or 3 feet above the floor. They are jumping, performing some sort of a martial arts or something. But their posture, which has been caught on a very high, fast shutter speed, that their action is frozen, is also achieved by a use of good photographic skills, where you act with the machine and you know how to use a fast shutter lens. Some photographs are appealing to photographers as well as laymen also. Laymen, I mean normal people. Like this photograph looks like a very dreamy and a very beautiful photograph, and there is a harmony in visual design and photographic use of the tone and texture and color. Like all the elements have been properly balanced. This girl is taken according to the rule of thirds, and she is positioned according to rule of thirds. And the other things are also, there is also a play of bokeh. You have very few areas which are focused, and all the other, even her both hands, you look at the left hand, it is not focused as the right one, and only a little part of these flowers is focused, and the rest of the part in the background and the foreground is basically left defocused or softly focused. So you have these shapes operating, whether you're looking at domes from inside, circular shape, or like mountains which are mostly triangular in shapes. You play with these geometric figures appearing in nature in such a way that they all look very harmoniously aligned. So when it comes to buildings, you have these rectangles, and similarly different shapes and figures. These, the fountains are also representative of lines in a way. Okay, now, shallow depth of field. When you come to the technical part of the camera, there's something called shallow depth of field. This is in focus, and the rest of the things, even in near proximity, are left defocused. Now, this is called shallow depth of field, which is achieved by using a small f number, or like opening up the aperture to the largest extent. Now, these things fall under the exposure triangle, which comprises of three things basically: the shutter, aperture, and the third thing is the shutter speed. So the shutter, aperture, and the um, uh, film speed. So these three things: what is the ISO of the film, what is the shutter speed, and how much you're opening the aperture. So these three things: aperture, shutter, and the ISO, these three comprise of, and they have an inverse and indirect relationship. Their proportion is inverse, and so the moment you open up your lens more, you have to reduce the shutter speed, and it's vice versa. Otherwise you will end up having a more or under or overexposed photograph. Now, this shallow depth of field, this is normally, because it's a very small object, so achieved by a macro lens also, and the other things in the background are so completely out of focus that you are not able to see what is in the background. Now, this is achieved by using a macro lens and opening up the macro lens to the maximum whole. Now, this exposure triangle needs to be understood in a very great deal. You have to understand that, but before understanding, I must say that exposure triangle is a very interesting topic to talk about, but it would take another presentation of mine. Like, it needs an independent 1 hour presentation for me to explain what is exposure triangle. But as a starting photographer, you must have a DSLR camera or a mirrorless camera with a macro or a tele, and with a standard lens, with a tripod and some ND filters, memory card, and camera batteries. This is the least that you can have when you want to go for photography. You can start with your mobile camera, but later on you will have to graduate to these professional ones. Um, what the At least the basic technical knowledge that you must have is that how do the shutters and the shutter speeds operate, how do you focus manually, and using different center weighted and different kinds of techniques that we use in focusing the objects. And then how do you frame? What are the rules that might help you compose images which are in harmony? Now, this third one is something worth talking about here, because there's something called rule of the thirds. When you divide the whole frame in 9 exactly equal parts, and then you align your object or subject of interest in one of these 4 intersections of these lines. Or then you have something called golden ratio, which is slightly comparatively more difficult than this one, but you can start with this rule of the thirds. Now, if you look at this photograph, this subject, this is aligned at point number, if you name it like A, B, C, D, then at point A, you have the important, the point of interest is here. So you have a perfect picture where you can see so many valleys out there, and she's sitting on a cliff or like the edge of a valley, and she's in a contemplative mode. She's thinking about something. So visually, this is a perfectly balanced photograph, not only because it's following rule of the thirds, it's also by color and tone very similar. At the same time, it's also shown in such a way that you can read this photograph in a deeper level. Like if you name this photograph as solitude, you have a solitary friend over here and she's in a thinking mode. So you can divide and say a lot of things about this. The same which we said for the previous photograph when we showed this, and she's in a pensive mode, she's thinking about something. And then you go to the next photograph where the use of slow shutter speed has given these lines. A train is passing through, or a bus is passing through, or some vehicles are passing through, and they are standing for a very long exposed time on a camera frame, and which is giving them a sense of timelessness. Like all the other things are passing by and they are still standing there, and they are, in a way, if you read, they're forming like of a heart kind of a figure here. So they are looking like a heart, a very intimate and a very passionate moment can be seen where they have closed their eyes and they lost themselves, and at the same time you can see their faces. So it's a perfectly well lit photograph. Okay, so this photograph was awarded in 1985. I forgot the name of the photographer. It was Stephen Mac something. So he was awarded for this photograph. Well, on the first look, it looks like a very common photograph. I mean, people say, why was this photograph regarded so great? But if you look at the whole picture, this Afghan girl in a war-torn Afghanistan was shown with in a very intense look she is giving towards the camera, as if she is questioning the photographer, like she's questioning the whole world, what the world is doing for her. And now you have this kind of green and orange, which are regarded as contrastic colors, juxtaposed in such a happy way that even her, like her dupatta and the background, the stole that she has and the background are like in contrastic colors. And then this green is again repeated in a pattern through her eyes, and this is called pattern in photography. So it's a beautiful photograph, especially the model, especially the muse that he has chosen by chance, and her face, though it's not a very expressive face, but yet the kind of features which are coming out are very questioning. So if you zoom in this photograph and look at the photo, look at just the face, it's a very strong opinionated photograph. So that's why it's one of the best photographs taken. And by the way, in 2017 the Afghan government gifted her a house, and now she has her house, and now she's 35 years or so in her age. So this brings us to the end of part 2, where we are looking at different compositional elements. When we come to the last part, where we're combining both photography, technical knowledge of the machines, and the aesthetic part of it, which is called creative photography. Now, this is basically something new which has actually come up, which the youngsters are using more. This is basically, creative photography is like new age methods of creatively combining elements in a frame that are either delight or surprise for the viewer. Now, what do? They employ several strategies. Those several strategies are like motion blur, bokeh, double exposure, high-speed photography, long exposures, reflections, shadows, macro photography, and a lot of other things are there that create a visual drama. And this is new. Like if you look at this photograph, it's while taking a photograph on a slightly lower shutter speed, you zoom out while you have clicked the shutter release button. So when you're taking a photograph, you're zooming out. So this gives you a kind of an effect as if this person is somewhat kind of an internal conflict is going on. So he's caught at crossroads within his psyche. On the other hand, when you go to a faster shutter speed and you are shooting a trajectory of water being splashed through a glass and you are taking a very fast shutter, everything is frozen and everything is seen crystal clear. At the same time, there are some staged photographs, this guy and this girl lying down on a road in such a way that they are visually depicting a shot. It looks like as if she's flying in the air, but this is basically road and they are lying down. But the arrangement is created in such a way that dramatically it creates an illusion as if they're that she is flying through the balloons and he's trying to get hold of her. Similarly, this lighting photograph, this is normal lightning which is happening, and then this girl wears and wears clothes like a witch, and then this is juxtaposed against the photograph. And this one is a common one where people have tried to got hold of the moon by creating like a composite and overlay photograph where it looks like as if she is holding the moon, and basically our eye is fooled by the illusion of composites. Now this is double exposure where you shoot a photograph but the frame does not move ahead, and you shoot another photograph on the same frame. So basically there are three photographs. One is of the long shot of the scenery, the other one is the couple, and the third one is the smaller couple out there. So there are multiple shots that are taken here. You can also use reflection on a clear floor or on water to create again a drama on the photograph. And there is spilling of the light. There is this light that is allowed from the sides of the lens to spill through to give a different tone of the photograph. Then you can use the mixture of different lightings, like you have a you have tungsten lighting, and then you have the fluorescent lighting being mixed in such a way that the mood is enhanced. And then these are, sprays which are being used on the sides of the camera, or you putting a film in front of the camera so that it does not harm your camera. There are other intelligent creative ways like tying off your laces on the camera, so it gives you like there are different many techniques that you can actually go. My favorite is this one where uh, a, different kinds of like alphabet are stuck on a paper, on a film outside the camera, and then a book is juxtaposed as if the words are coming out of the book and the alphabets are flying. So in totality, what I would say, when you summarize, photography can really be creative with some rules learned on framing, with some hands-on experience on camera techniques. Visual beauty should be appreciated through elements of visual design. So that's all with my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope in some future sessions we will take it in details. Thank you.